Welcome back to the Inner Anchor, guys. Thank you for joining me. On today's episode, when you feel lost, we're talking about something every one of us has felt at some point, even if we haven't said it out loud. And that's, as the title suggests, it's feeling lost. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind of falling apart kind, although we have those moments as well, but just that quiet sort of unsettling sense that you've drifted away from yourself. That you're moving through life, doing what you're supposed to do, doing what's right for others, but something inside feels disconnected. It's foggy, it's unfamiliar, it doesn't feel natural. Equally, the episode is also about the other kind of feeling lost, when I mentioned there, that kind of awakening realisation, that sudden panic, of realising you're not where you want to be, where you feel like you should be. And you're not carrying out your sort of authentic self. About the moments where you don't really recognise yourself. The days you feel like you're watching your own life instead of living it. About the times when you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong, but you know something isn't lining up right, something's not centred. And most importantly, today is about how you return. So if you've been feeling like a little numb, a little overwhelmed, directionless, just not in your own skin, then this one might be for you. Because, feeling lost doesn't mean that you've failed in life. It doesn't mean you're broken, you've done something wrong, you've made a mistake necessarily. It doesn't mean you've gone backwards, that, you're failing in some way. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means you've drifted, you coasted for a while. And drifting happens slowly. And quietly over time we just drift away from where we feel like our true self lays. If you're lost, you could feel like you don't know what you want, not knowing how to feel or what you feel, not knowing who you are as a person outside of your responsibilities. We all have responsibilities of mortgage and rent and bills, and some of us will have children and other ties, work, all those kind of things, all those things that people say is a definition of you, but it's not always who you are, your true being. Feeling disconnected from your own life, feeling like you carrying something you can't name, or, to quote a favourite band of mine, feeling like you're here but you're not all there. It's identity fog. It should just be being emotionally static, for want of a better term. That sense that you've moved too far away from your truth, your authentic self. And the weirdest and sometimes most hardest thing to try and explain this to people sometimes is you can look completely fine on the outside while feeling completely lost on in. And you're allowed to feel that. I've certainly felt it. Sometimes you feel like if you're appearing fine and maybe certain things aesthetically are as people would expect, that there's a permission that you somehow need to admit it. But with that, this episode is your permission to admit that. You don't need my permission, but hopefully this episode will allow you to have those conversations that you feel like you might not have had as yet. Just be true to yourself and be honest about it, because the longer you're not honest, the more you're going to drift. We all get lost, we all drift. You drift through pressure of life, through responsibility. I drifted through grief because I didn't really process any of it. Through silence, through trying to be strong for everyone else, for trying to do the right thing for everyone else, in terms of how we wish to carry ourselves, not only as in day to day and how we act, but also where we want to be in life, what we want out of it. Sometimes you compromise to the point of wanting to help and support others and those around you, but it's at a point where you lost your own identity because you let that bit go and you let this bit go and you gave that bit to someone and that bit to someone else, and then suddenly you truly are lost. Through pretending you're fine when we're not. We get lost when you stop checking in with yourself, when we stop slowing down, when you're on that hamster wheel of just keeping going by day, when we stop telling our truth. And I don't mean lying to people, I mean not being honest in how we're feeling emotionally and where we sit and where we want to be. When we stop listening to our own needs, if you're serving your life for others, and that's not an unadmirable thing to do, a lot of us would want to help others and do what's right for those we love. But if you don't listen to your own needs and what you want out of life, you're wasting it. You're wasting it. And those who truly love you will be along for the journey, no matter what they stand to benefit. And when we stop grounding, sometimes we get lost because life hits us hard, and moments can truly shake your identity, your makeup, who you feel you truly are. There are moments in life that will change us, moments that leave us standing in the aftermath, wondering how to face the world, wondering who we are now, wondering where we stand, wondering how others seek us. And feeling lost isn't weakness, it's just a sign that something inside you is asking for attention. It's a part of you that's asking for recognition, to be seen and heard. It's the beginning of your return to your real self, really. And as I say, I've been lost on a few occasions in life. That moment, it's strange because when I look back on it in hindsight, I knew I was drifting for a number of years and just coasting because I was, as I've said before, when my dad passed away, I didn't believe I could be the person I'd been before, because that trajectory of trauma had completely changed my outlook. So in a lot of ways, I was different to the guy beforehand. What I've come to realise in recent years, having gone through my CBT counselling, my therapy sessions and a lot of internal work, is that that without doubt had a huge impact on me, and in many ways I was a different person. But equally, in many ways I was the same. But whilst I thought I couldn't carry that guy home and with me at that point, that 22-year-old man who lost his dad, and I left him behind, I was aware I was drifting and I was looking for a new identity, I guess, a new way to be, and I didn't know who that person was. I didn't know what life looked like without my dad, so I did just get through each day. And I remember it coming up a few times, that voice in your head that tells you this isn't you and this isn't right, and we should be doing X and we should be doing Y. Life was kind of happening around me, but it wasn't something I was invested in. I didn't feel like I was in it. I was functioning, I was going to work, I was showing up for doing things I was supposed to be. But I never truly felt like me. And I guess that's because I wasn't being me anymore at that point. I'm working hard to be a more grown-up version of that 22-year-old self that I lost. I didn't recognise the guy I'd become. I didn't recognise the choices I was making. I didn't recognise the way I was carrying everything alone. I wasn't talking to anyone. I wasn't checking in. I wasn't saving space for myself. I was giving everything to others at the detriment of what I was giving to myself, which was nothing. I was beating myself up for things that weren't within my control, like my dad passing away. I was swallowing stuff down, I was pushing it down, I was locking it in cupboards and drawers. You know, carrying the weight I didn't need to carry. And the irony for me is, that was exactly the opposite of what my dad taught me in life. And when he died, I lost him. I wanted nothing more than to have him back, to have him in my life. But in many ways, I ignored everything he taught me. I stopped talking about how I was feeling, to stop others from, some from judging, some from family members hurting. There were certain things other people did in terms of grief that I let go because they were grieving, but it hurt, and I never addressed it. I allowed people to tell me how they thought I should grieve, how they thought I should behave, instead of doing what I needed to do at the time. Because in my sense, my loss of self came from, because from that moment I gave up who I was so that others, I was so keen to hang on to everything that was still around me that I allowed bits of myself to fall away, to become a version of me that was keeping the peace and being acceptable to whoever else. And then in doing this, and if you've done it yourself, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I found myself being different versions of myself to different people. I was a different version of myself in a working environment to I was with my family. I was a different work to a family version till I was out with my friends. I was different in the work from friends to, fellow martial arts people that I was training with, to my wife, to everyone. It's like I felt like like the honestly wasn't enough to anyone, so that I had to be a version of it to those who were in the room at the time. But the thing is, if you keep being a different version to yourself, to everyone, even if you're only 10% different across all versions, you're never truly yourself. So you lose sight of what that raw, authentic version of yourself is. And the truth, and the hardest part for me to admit to myself, was that I had drifted so far from myself and who I was and my beliefs and my emotions, and who I was, and allowing myself to admit how I felt on certain occasions and at certain things, and where I let stuff slide when maybe I should have spoke up. I had drifted so far from myself that I really didn't know how to get back to who I was. And then, as you know, Joe and I spoke coming up for 2 years ago on that beach in Cornwall, and it all came flooding out. And that was the beginning of what became the inner anchor. That was the beginning of all of this, these last 13 episodes. And I thank you all for joining me on it. We've got one more next week of this series. And I will be moving forward with this podcast. And it will morph slightly, I guess, into how it's supposed to be. But it will always be true and honest. And I wanted this series to be a real honest account of my own stories, my own opinions on things, like the sort of manoverse thing we spoke about over 3 episodes. Grounding techniques that I've found really helpful these last 2 years. And just as a shout out and a safe space for everyone to come to listen, not to me on an ego front, just in a way that they might connect, they might feel the same. But that was my moment. And that was the beginning of everything that became the inner anchor, everything that changed my mindset. That was the beginning of me starting to look for another way to live. Because once you admit that you're lost, you can start returning, you know. And how did I find myself again? In all honesty, it's been a lot of work. In all honesty, there's a lot of work still going on. And I think there always will be. I think there's always I think we as human beings will always work, and should always work on ourselves to become who we are. Like David Bowie said, you spend your whole life learning to be who you are. And I think that's true. And it was a lot of work to do the initial phase. It was quite draining, emotionally, physically, spiritually, to lay everything out on the table. What had hurt me, who had hurt me, where the upset had been caused, accepting my part in it, accepting what I had done that maybe I shouldn't have done to myself, to the situation. All those kind of things. There was a lot of... It was slow. It was hard work. There was a lot of experimentation with various grounding techniques, some of which aligned with me, which we've spoken about on here, like journaling and breath work and meditation, and then you saw the more like daily ritual stuff of eating well and making sure I'm sleeping and going to the gym and reading when I can and all those kind of things. Not stopping myself from to listen to certain bands and music was a big thing. Through stillness, through telling myself the truth, through being honest with myself. But the biggest one, I guess, was through sitting with myself instead of running from it. You know, learning to be happy with my own company again. And learning to get to know myself again. That was a huge thing. Learning to like myself again. To reconnect with the parts of me that I'd fully abandoned. And for a while I was saying it was rebuilding, but it wasn't rebuilding. It was returning. It was reconnecting. And that came through a variety of ways. But that's what the inner anchor is about. It's not about becoming someone new. It's not about reinventing yourself or fixing yourself. It's about being honest and returning to yourself and coming home to that core part of you that never left, even when you did. You know, disconnection with yourself can feel like a number of things. It can be feeling numb. It can be overthinking. It can be being irritated, being irritable. Avoidance, feeling emotionally head cloudy, foggy, feeling like you're not fully in your body, like you're living on autopilot. It's a sense that you're not anchored, you're not present, you're not fully connected to yourself. You might be functioning, going to work, showing up, paying the bills, paying the mortgage, doing all those things that you're supposed to do, but inside something ain't right and it feels off. And that off feeling, for me, which developed this way of thinking, that off feeling was me feeling like, that inner anchor was trying to pull me back to where I should be, pull me back to who I am, pull me back to where I am, at my inner core, at my most centered, grounded person, authentic, raw version of myself. Not saying perfect, I'm far from that, but it was the honest version of me that I should have always been aligned with. And there's a many reason why we why you forget, and why you feel lost. Disconnecting from your truth, as I mentioned earlier. When you stop being honest with yourself, stop acknowledging what hurts, and stop admitting what we need, we stop listening to our own inner voice. And when you stop listening to yourself as you are as a person at your core soul being, and you're only listening to outside influences, then naturally you do drift. In the moment you start thinking, maybe I should be like this, or okay, maybe I should do that, and trying to emulate other people in their actions, that's the moment you lose yourself. And we've all done it. I'm not judging any of you who may be sitting there listening thinking, well, I definitely have done that, because I have, and I did for a long time, for a long time. So I'm not judging when I say this, I just want to help those who might be feeling lost. Sometimes we carry too much, hold the pressure, the responsibility, the emotions that, we never learned how to process, that expectation that was never ours in the first place. And when you're feeling all that pushing and pulling and pressure and responsibility, that weight can eventually just disconnect you from yourself, because you've just, it's overwhelming, right? It's like anything, sometimes you forget to return. The inner anchor and the still points that I talk about here aren't permanent. They sit there permanently, but I'm not always permanently attached to them. I've had a lot go on these last 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks now, as we've spoken about before, between the car accident, and that really hit me quite emotionally, to be honest. I didn't go to the gym for a while. I lost my confidence there, and that's really a place where I get a bit of clarity in the morning, and that's affected me quite a lot. On top of that, there's a lot going on in both families, my wife's and mine, that it's just a lot to process and to deal with. And when you aren't returning to yourself, when you're dealing with that, you just naturally can feel yourself drifting away. But without grounding, without checking in, without coming back to your still point, back to the inner anchor, you're just going to bob away. You're going to drift. It's just going to happen. It's like when you're, certainly I've felt like this, so this comes from my point of view here, like, if you feel like you're putting on a little bit of weight, but you think, oh, that's okay. And then suddenly, you could have put a couple more pounds on, maybe after Christmas, something like that, and then you just don't do anything about it. And you're still in, suddenly, a stone and a half, 2 stone heavier than you used to be, it just increments like anything. And you drift, and then you're like, Jesus, how am I going to do all this now? And this is kind of what I wanted the inner anchor to be, for those of people who are lost like I was, as a way to help them find their self again. It's not really a tool or a technique, kind of a mindset, but the inner anchor itself, as I kept starting to term it, was that place within you that does move, even when everything around you does. Even when life does. You know, when you feel lost, you don't need to reinvent yourself. I thought I did. I thought I needed to start again. I didn't. I thought I needed to become someone new. I didn't. I needed to hold on to that 22-year-old me who was lost, confused. His world had fallen apart. Who was angry, who was heartbroken, who was disconnected, fatigued. Every emotion under the sun this boy felt, including being abandoned. And I abandoned him as well. And I should have held on to him. I should have told him he'll be okay. That somehow we'd find a way. It's taken me a long time to even acknowledge that. So I am sorry to him. I just hope now that I can make it a little bit better and try and maybe take him forward with me. I needed to return. Return to my breath, to body, to truth, to my values, to my still point. And I guess the biggest realization for me was that grounding techniques aren't about being calm and zen. It's about connecting. It's the act of coming back to yourself after drifting that too far away. And feeling lost is simply, like I said earlier, it's that message that it's time to return home. Return to who you are, to where you want to be. Return to your authentic self. You know, and there's a number of ways that you can ground yourself when you feel lost. We've been through some before. There's the what I refer to as the anchor return, and it's that bit of breath work there that we went through on a previous episode. So a quick 60 seconds, one breath, one truth, one moment of presence. That honesty check-in that we spoke about before, you know, what's true for me right now? What do I need right now to get through it? The anchor breath that we've spoken about, you know, dropping your shoulders, returning to your body, slow inhale, slow exhale. And none of these practices fix your life, but they will reconnect you to it. That's just the way life goes. But know this. You are allowed to feel lost. You're allowed to drift. And why on earth are you allowed to return to yourself? You haven't failed. You haven't fallen behind. But it is time for you to find your way back to yourself. However that may be. Whether it's through grounding, whether it's through listening to this podcast, whether it's going and getting services from places like Talk Club and Andy's Man Club and CBT therapy and counsellors, or just speaking to friends, speaking to family, speaking to loved ones, and just being honest, because you know your pathway, but it's a bit like, you know, until you take the steps, sometimes you don't know where they lead to, and sometimes until you speak, you don't know what you're going to describe as your pathway, but you do as a person. You know that. And feeling lost can become one of the most important moments in your life, if you meet it the right way. You know, it forces you to stop, to listen, to reconnect, to return, to bring yourself back to your truth, to your body, to your breath, to your anchor. Feeling lost isn't the end. It's the beginning of clarity. It was something that I felt for a long time. But it was only when I acknowledged that feeling and was honest about it that I could do something about it. And these last 2 years have been tough. Really tough. And I've still got work ahead. There's still a lot going on in my life. I've got family members who are dying of cancer. I'm recovering from injuries following a car accident. I'm recovering from the mental injuries of that as well. You know, times are tough out there for everyone. Cost of living's going up. You know, things are tough. There's a lot of anger on out in the world right now. We've spoken about. There's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot to navigate and negotiate. And when you're trying to negotiate all of that, it's very easy to become lost again. But feeling that loss is the beginning of clarity. Because if you're lost, you know that you don't want to be there. Therefore, you must know where you want to be. Sometimes the tricky bit is getting there. But you can find your way. And I hope you guys do. However you reconnect, I hope you connect and find your way home. But knowing that feeling lost isn't the end, it's that clarity. You then know where you want to be because you know you don't want to be there. And if today's episode has landed with you, if you recognise yourself in the fog, if you felt something shift, then this is your invitation to return to home. Return to yourself. Return to who you are. Not to fix yourself, not to change yourself, and not to become anyone else. Just return to who you are truly. Because as I say, feeling lost doesn't mean you've lost yourself forever. It means you're ready to be that person again, to find yourself again, in whatever version of or capacity of the person you used to be that is. Like I say, I didn't go, oh, I should have always continued to be who I was, that 20-year-old me, and go back to being 22-year-old me. I couldn't. Too much had happened. You know what I mean? There was a lot of trauma there. But I could carry them with me, and I could become a 38-year-old version of the 22-year-old that I left behind. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's what moment I'm focusing on, is finding myself again. What does my real self want in this life? Because you know what? I am enough. And you are enough. You are enough to love. You're enough to be kind to yourself. You are enough for people to be honest with. You are enough to be connected, to have your say, to have your space. You are enough to be you. You are not alone in this. I guarantee you, anyone you know, if they're honest, will tell you that they have felt lost at some point. They might not say it out loud, but I guarantee you they felt it. I didn't say it out loud for years, but I'm saying it now. And you can say it now too. You can acknowledge it. You can meet it. And that's the beginning of your return. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being here. You know, thank you for, I know a lot of you have messaged me and said that you get a lot from this, so that means a lot, and thank you for reaching out. But thank yourself for doing the work, the real work of coming home to yourself. Next week is the season 1 finale. I can't believe I'm saying this already. Next week will be episode 14. And when I started this journey 13 weeks ago, will be 14 weeks ago, of course, next week, I didn't know how it was going to be. I didn't know if anyone would listen. I didn't know if anyone would resonate. I hope that they would, and I hope that it would find the people. And I hope it continues to find the people that it's meant for. I've had a lot of nice comments, a lot of people reaching out, telling me that they really like how I'm putting things across and they resonate with the language that I use, that they're some people who I know personally are shocked by the things I kept wrapped up. But the most important thing is that it is reaching some people that need it. I hope it continues to do that. and I'd like to thank every one of you who's been part of the journey so far. I hope if you feel like it's for anyone you know who might not have come across it, then please do share the links, add them to the social media channels, all those kind of bits and bobs. Stay subscribed, because this isn't the end. We've got one more episode to go through, which will be next week, and this will not be the end of my Inner Anchor podcast. I've already got plans for episode 2, series 2 I should say. But yeah, I'll see you next week for the season finale, which is simply called The Return, Living Life Anchored. Stay grounded, stay steady, stay anchored, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.